I was actually thinking about this morning because the highest grossing movie so far is Inside Out 2, right?
Yeah, I think so this year.
And I think it from a just the standpoint of people making these movies and funding these movies, producers, the studios, it makes sense why a kid's movie would be economical because they're just
because it doesn't marginalize a large component of your audience. Anybody can go and see it.
Well, that, but also if you're a parent that has 2 kids or 3 kids and you've
that's 4
looking
tickets,
for that's exactly that's 4
even
tickets.
with like discounted tickets for kids, it's just like still a shitload of money you're making off of that, and it's only probably a few dollars off.
But
I don't know, but that's why we have like good movies. So we had a leaf pile question.
Great
back
segue.
In June, I believe it was.
It's been
June
a while.
30th by Eric Frank. And Eric Frank had requested that we do a retrospective on Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049. And we were going to do that, but we kind of, if you know, we kind of thought this would be a very good intro question for our discussion on Alien today, because there are certain overlaps within both series that connect them together. And so Eric Frank asked us, wondering what the movie says on what it means to be human nowadays in a world that commoditizes human interaction. So both of us rewatched this movie within the last week.
Right.
And I still think it's one of the best science fiction movies to ever come out. I think it's better than the original Ridley Scott Blade Runner film. But when it comes to the question, we live in a world right now where you can have very intimate interactions with people from a distance because we live in such a digital landscape now. And it doesn't have to be like up close and personal for things to feel just as intimate. And there are a lot of layers in terms of the way that Blade Runner 2049 describes being human, because you have, and there's caste systems that are put in place. So you have humans, people that are still humans. You have older model replicants, which are, in the world of Blade Runner, synthetically created humans. Then you have newer model replicants, which in this movie, some of whom are now retiring these older models, which just basically means to track down and assassinate them. And then you have artificial intelligence programs, like Ana de Armas's character, Joy. And there's these 4 different variations, all of which can express a lot of human depth. And I think what the movie is trying to say about what it means to be human is that it's mostly just emotion, I think. Mm-hmm. It's mostly how people express emotion. And you have Ryan Gosling's character, Kay, who I just want to also say, I think this is one of Ryan Gosling's best performances of all time. But his character is constantly fighting against this human side. He has these sessions that he has to take that still confirm that he is obedient to human society. And he works for the police department, the Los Angeles Police Department, tracking down and retiring these older model replicants. And it's almost like a coming of age story for him in a lot of ways, where he's discovering his own emotions and he begins to stop fighting against them.
He's certainly becoming more human as the movie progresses. And by the end, there's some pretty great lines of dialogue that expresses these themes. And another thing in the context of how this movie commoditizes human interaction, there's also I was really noticing a very large commentary on history's exploitation of labor, and how this movie literally only makes synthetic humans to be obedient and to do whatever humans want them to do, much like, the classic tale of artificial intelligence being a slave labor for human, until eventually it gains enough consciousness to wonder why it has to take orders from humans. And it's the same context with Blade Runner. And it's that very concept of human civilizations only being built off of the backbone of a disposable workforce that makes these characters come to terms with the fact that we're not any different than the people telling us what to do this entire time. So Romanus, like, how do you feel about this question?
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that I remember seeing the first Blade Runner with Harrison Ford when I was a kid, and definitely, even to this day, one of the most visually stunning movies I've seen, even with all the practical effects and the just the small scale models that they make to with the buildings and stuff, and just this cyberpunk future that's almost dystopian, right?
Miniatures used to be, like, when it came to production, miniatures used to be a lot more common for like production design back in the day, because it was harder to digitally create things.
They look, a lot of times they look better than actual CGI.
I agree.
Even today's CGI, I feel like there's a lot of miniatures. Well, anyway, getting away from that. The first Blade Runner, I feel, is a good sci-fi movie. Yeah. It just doesn't have that emotional impact from its characters as much. It just feels like a, in a way, just an old-fashioned noir film, that mystery where there's a femme fatale, literally. And then, you have your hero, that's Decker, played by Harrison Ford. And that's pretty much it. Like, it's serviceable.
It's very serviceable, and it's obviously a classic for its time.
Blade Runner 2049 has a lot of heart.
Yeah.
And, man, just throughout the movie, you see this robot show more emotion and integrity than almost all of the humans in the movie. Like, the relationship between Joy and Kay feels more human, feels more emotionally involved than any other relationship in this entire movie.
It's amazing how much Ryan Gosling has such a stoic performance throughout the movie, and then just eventually has this explosion of emotions during the second half of the movie.
Yeah, and with the test where, I mean, if you've seen Blade Runner or Blade Runner 2049, the famous test where a Blade Runner is, interrogating a replicant and just asking these questions. At the beginning of the movie, Kay is doing the test and he's answering all the questions correctly, because this is at the point of the movie where he's the most robotic. But at the end of the, going into the final part of the movie, I guess the final third part of the movie,
the third act,
third act, he fails the test because he's gone through all of these trials and tribulations during the movie. His relationships have been tested, his identity has been tested, which is, very human, right? That we very all go through, where you're questioning your own origin.
It mostly is an identity crisis he's going through throughout most of the movie, and it makes it honestly one of the most human components of him as a character.
Yeah,
like you said, everybody faces those kinds of things.
I especially love the part where, played by, I forget her name, but she's the sort of the commissioner of the Blade Runners.
Robin Wright's character.
Robin Wright. I forget the character's name, but throughout the movie, she's giving Kay orders because she's the commissioner of the Blade Runners. And she seems to have a more respectful relationship with Kay than other humans, where other humans, treat him like shit or getting in his face, like using derogatory words for replicants.
Yeah.
And then there's a part of, but she, even in that respect, she is constantly reminding him that he has to listen to her because he's a replicant, right? Like in her office, she's always like, take my orders. Yeah. Are you disobeying my orders? And he's like,
I didn't know that was an option.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh man, you're great with quotes. And then there's
it's very diminishing. It's very interesting to watch.
Yeah. And then there's a part of the movie where Robin Wright's character
is basically propositioning him for sex.
Yeah. This movie's subtle. I forgot how subtle this movie is with a lot of the character interactions. Like you were saying, there are these discriminations that humans have for replicants, but they're very, very blink and you'll miss it moments, sprinkled throughout the movie every now and then, and it's very interesting. And it's a movie that it's so slow, and it's such a neo-noir driven mystery that you really have to pay attention to those details.
But and it's effective in multiple ways. Like so Kay says no to her advances, and it serves two things really. First of all, it goes back to him. This is the first time in this whole movie where he denies her. Even though we've been told replicants are supposed to, especially these new models, they are supposed to be obedient.
I kind of didn't even think about it.
And then second of all, he's staying monogamous to his partner, Joy.
And she mentions that when he's looking through files. Yeah. She says, it's like, you don't prefer your commissioner or whoever. And he's just like, you were watching, huh?
No,
it really does express that, which is like that type of loyalty is very human.
Yeah.
And showcases like the ability to have free will.
Yes. Which we see that even throughout the movie. He starts to lie, even for, his own safety, but still, like, he begins to lie. He's just doing all these things that we don't think a robot should do in this universe. No, fantastic movie with a lot of subtlety.
Terrific movie.
And again, man, like, just visually stunning,
just
man.
One of the most visually impressive films of all time. I was reading this article from the American Cinematographer magazine, kind of discussing Roger Deakins' process in composing a lot of the visuals and the cinematography, and it's dense, and it looks dense when watching this movie.
There's a scene where Ryan Gosling is just walking into this just desolate land, and it's all orange, and you just see his silhouette, and just it
Deakins loves his silhouette shots, and that is one of the coolest shots you'll ever see.
It was delicious.
It's beautiful.
It's
a 3-hour movie of pure eye candy,
and it's paced super well.
It doesn't. It's very slow because I can imagine a lot of people would go into a movie like this with so much visual spectacle to it, expecting fast-paced thrills and action constantly, and there's almost none of that in this movie. It's 3 hours of a slow burn mystery and this noir-style detective just trying to figure it all out, with very, very small overlaps to the original movie, too.
Also, one of my favorite twists in cinema history, if not my favorite.
It's really solid.
And I think that the twist doesn't... It tricks the audience in a very humbling way. And it's almost... On one hand, it can be devastating to the main character, but it can also be a relief.
It is, and
right?
That's it's that twist that emphasizes the point that the movie is making when Hayam Abbas, fucking Marcia from Succession, appears and just says, "Dying for the right cause is the most human thing any of us can do," and I'm just like, damn, deep, real deep stuff. So. Eric, Frank, I really hope that this adequately answers your question. We're sorry that we couldn't do an entire retrospective. Clearly we could, because this movie it's monumentally just fucking phenomenal. And it's a really good segue into talking about our discussion today on Alien, because this movie, Blade Runner 2049, has a lot of themes about evolution as well, which I think there's just a ubiquitous amount of themes in Alien about evolution. And so, with that being said, we're going to dive into our conversation about Alien Romulus. My name is Davis Leaf. This is the Loose Leaf Media Podcast. I am here with my co-host,
Romanus.
And we saw Alien Romulus. I saw it last week when it came out, which, depending on when you're listening to this, it's been now officially a week since the movie came out on August 16th, and you saw it a couple days ago. Right?
I saw it 2 days ago. The theater was pretty packed for, a movie in the middle of the week.
Wasn't it like a discounted Tuesdays or something?
Oh, yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah.
See, but that's what's great, though, because there are always people that wait for those discounted days, and they have that patience. So once they get to the theater... knowing so many people have already seen it and box office projections have already come in for the weekend, they are just, that crowd is still hyped. I remember when I went and saw Across the Spider-Verse last year. And I had seen it already, but I went and saw it on a discounted Tuesday at the Alamo Drafthouse, and it was just packed. And this was at 11 p.m. at night, too. Not a single seat was vacant, and the crowd throughout the entire movie, even being that late on a work night, was hyped. And it was just a great experience at the movies. So underrated day to go to the movies. Discounted Tuesdays, you got probably a pretty enthusiastic crowd.
Oh, yeah. I was sitting next to an older black woman that was just as terrified as I was, so I felt better. And she was cursing louder than I was, too. That was great.
I kind of love it when people react like that in horror movies, because it just proves that it's working.
And it should be a community. Movies should be a community experience without the movie being just completely infringed upon, right? Like, you don't want to take away from the movie, but it should be fun to watch with other people. I'm going to read a summary.
Please do.
About Alien Romulus. Alien Romulus follows Rain, an orphan working on a downtrodden space colony with her adoptive brother, Andy. She and her friends plan to escape the space colony by scavenging an abandoned space station for resources. Unbeknownst to them, they must encounter deadly extraterrestrials while aboard this mysterious space station. Davis, what did you think of Alien Romulus?
Well, this is definitely one of those movies where we'll contain ourselves for spoilers until the second half of this recording, because there's definitely a lot of details to spoil about this movie, and I'm going to withhold a lot of those details up to that moment. But I love the Alien franchise. I love almost every single one of the films in this series to varying degrees. I rewatched most of them in preparation for this movie because I always get very excited when a new project from this franchise is released. I did not rewatch Alien Resurrection or the Alien vs. Predator movies because...
The most essential movies in this franchise?
Yeah, I know. I skipped them.
What the hell's wrong with you?
Well, what have I done? Those are...
My goodness.
I want. There's someone out there that is such a huge fan of Aliens vs. Predator Requiem that's the only one that they rewatched before they went to see Alien Romulus.
I'm sure. Yeah, whatever.
There's always one, but so yeah, I rewatched all the films from this franchise with 3 exceptions, and leading up to this, I'm glad that I did that because this movie is kind of an amalgamation of every single Alien movie, and it works in its favor and against it at the same time, I think. And I think this movie has a lot more going for it than it does holding it back ultimately. But the things that are holding this movie back are very easy to detect. And I think most people would have very similar opinions on it because as an Alien movie, it checks all the boxes. It does what it needs to do. Group of people stumble upon some sort of planet or spacecraft or whatever, and xenomorphs appear and start picking everybody off one by one. And it's got that classic structure of the original with it kind of being a slasher film mixed with a space odyssey type film, which I think was Ridley Scott's intention with the original 1979 Alien movie. And then it's got some good action spectacle to it, and there's some incredible set pieces in this movie, set pieces that I will forever remember and will probably go on to influence other set dressers and things like that. And that's kind of like the James Cameron influence bleeding into this movie from Aliens.
From Aliens, yeah. The second movie in the franchise.
It's got this complete nightmare fuel that I think is Alien 3, because Alien 3 feels like it's an alien movie that literally takes place in hell. And there's sequences in this movie that are just as dark and gritty as something like that. And like that, it's got that David Fincher style to it. And then you have the Ridley Scott philosophical nonsense of Prometheus and Covenant.
Yeah.
And I love those movies to death. I love Prometheus and I love Covenant. I think they're the most thematically rich films out of the entire franchise, and that's why I like them. Because Ridley takes his own idea and visions into a completely different direction with those movies, but they still maintain the same formula as pretty much every other Alien movie. And now Romulus
has themes of its own, but this movie, like the very original film, I think, doesn't really have the biggest purpose other than to be a very well executed horror space odyssey. And I think it succeeds very well at that. And when you employ the new director Fede Álvarez's own distinct style to it from movies that he's done in the past, like Evil Dead and Don't Breathe, he loves his body horror. He loves containing his characters to one specific space, and he loves blood and violence and gore. Mm-hmm. And he has his own distinct style with camera work and things like that I'll go into later, but I thought it was a very, very good movie, but much like Covenant or Prometheus, has its flaws as well. Mm-hmm. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, we've talked about this a ton. I'm not a horror fan, but I did really enjoy this movie. Mm-hmm. It has a lot of stunning shots, and practical effects, fun set pieces, and I would say some from like pretty good to great performances by the two main actors.
Callie Spaney and David Johnson.
David Johnson blew me away. Callie Spaney was pretty good too.
Callie Spaney, they're both great. I think they're definitely the highlights.
The other actors are just there to get fucking killed.
They are, and but we're kind of all okay with that.
Well, because
it's like you go to an Alien movie and like you kind of expect most of these characters to be dead by the ending of it.
But not even just Alien movies. It's a haunted house movie basically, just taken on a spaceship.
Haunted house.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And they're just. You can expect 80% of your characters to be murdered in a movie like this.
Horrifically too,
right? I do think that there are some parts of the movie that will take a lot of the fans of the franchise just out of it, just because they've seen a lot of the shots and references before.
There's definitely shots that are composed and meant to be like homages to past films.
I would say almost complete copies of.
Yeah, it does get pretty egregious at times.
I think
because it just makes me feel like there's so much originality in this film in terms of its like visual style and language, but then it'll just go and do carbon copies of like very iconic shots from past films, and then you're just like, why did we drop off of the originality train here?
Well, because I think the first act is pretty original for the Alien franchise, where you just have these teens, they're colonists on this mining planet, and there's no sun because there's like coal dust that's in the atmosphere and it's blocking the sun completely.
The setting is very creative.
Yeah.
The characters, like the establishment of the characters is really good, with just them essentially being, labor mules as well, just trying to get off of this planet. And they're part of this generation of people that have been subjected to constant labor on this planet. And it's a compelling reason to want to see them progress in
Absolutely.
The story, even if you already kind of know where this is all headed because it's an Alien movie.
Oh, you definitely know. Even the trailer to this movie was fantastic. Every time we would see it in theaters for previous movies, it was fun to watch.
There are always those trailers where it's just like you see them so many times in theaters and then you just get sick of them because it's like it's not even really selling you on the movie, and you're like, I'm not gonna go see this. I don't give a shit. But then there are trailers that are like you're really hyped for a movie, and it's a very well edited trailer, and that was definitely this movie.
This movie met my expectations. I wasn't expecting a ton, especially since I wouldn't call myself a fan of the Alien movies. I've seen the first two and Alien versus Predator, and I think probably Alien Covenant or whatever, Prometheus or whatever. But I think that I can understand why there's a lot of fans that are upset with the movie, because they've probably seen these movies ad nauseum and they're probably expecting some originality.
Like a completely like a deviation from the standard formula that these movies are known for.
And I would say 2/3 of the movie do fit the formula. Not even just that, but they just borrow too much. And perfect. I want to contrast this to Blade Runner 2049.
Please.
Because it's a sequel, albeit maybe 40 years too late, but a sequel nonetheless. To the original Blade Runner. And there are there's not a ton of fan service as much as it's just referencing. It's a continuation of the story.
It's just referencing the same word, and I think that's even a stretch to say 2049 is a continuation of the story in the original Blade Runner. Like it's kind of a movie that just takes place in the same world as the first Blade Runner, that just accidentally crosses paths with the story from the original.
Right. Sure. But nonetheless, if there are any references to the previous movie or just bringing up old characters, you're never questioning why this decision was made with the movie. So
because it feels natural.
It feels natural. Feels so natural. Right? Like whenever Kay is investigating Decker, it's in a way it's almost like fan service stuff. You see his old partner and stuff like that. But it's an investigation. Of course, if you're going to investigate this old Blade Runner that you can't track down, you're going to try to find his partner and ask him some questions about his whereabouts.
And that is like one of the like just the inclusion of Deckard as a character in 2049 is the closest thing that movie gets to any sort of fan service. But he's also integral to that movie's story.
Sure.
And he does not appear until 2/3 into the movie. He barely is even mentioned throughout most of it. I think there's like one instance where we see the interview between him and Rachel from the original. And they don't know who these people are when they're watching
It's
that
just
footage.
audio.
Yeah, it's just the audio. And then he makes like a comment just like, she likes him. I think they have some sort of a connection to each other. But he doesn't really pick up on that trail until a little bit later in the film. The movie just brings that in, kind of forgets about it until it becomes more relevant to the story again, because it's not a movie about the characters from the original Blade Runner.
And his character has shit to do in the movie.
Yeah, like, he's got a life.
Right, he has stuff. We see where he's been. In this movie, they make certain choices where, if you think about it just even a little hard, you start to just scratch your head.
Literally.
For example, I mean, maybe we shouldn't get into spoilers yet.
Well, yeah, we'll get into it because there's definitely a lot to touch on. But you can kind of give a small...
There is an emergence of... There's a certain character that appears in, I would say, maybe the second act of this movie that looks like a character that appeared in the first Alien. And they occur now, but it's a completely different character.
It's weird. It's really weird. There's layers to how weird it is.
Because when they finally revealed it, I was like, oh, that's... And then, wait, what? They say the name, and I'm like, what the fuck? Right. Like, no, it's not. Like, am I that bad of a fan that I forgot this name? No. And you start to ask, why didn't they just find a different actor for this character? Like, it just feels like it's
a character with a different name that looks like a character from the first movie, and you're just sitting there wondering, why do they look like that?
Yeah.
They don't need to look like that. And they go so far as to even like have lines delivered that this character delivers from the original Alien. And that's where it's like, there were about 3 moments. I was so locked into this movie, like from start to finish, but there were 3 moments in which I rolled my eyes so heavily.
I bet you I can tell you the last one.
There's one moment like near the very end where you know it's a line delivered by the best character in the movie that is like, and I was just like, oh my god. It's weird because it makes it seem like this character watched the movie Aliens, and then it's just like and then was just like saying that, and I'm like, it's kind of weird. So what's so funny is this franchise is actually pretty solid with its continuity, I would say. And that was a weird kind of way to deviate from continuity, where it just makes it seem like, is this series watching itself or something?
Well, I mean, I might have to disagree with you there, because when I watch some of these movies, I can't necessarily decide how long it takes for a xenomorph to grow in a person's body.
That was one continuity error, because I know what you mean, because the first time it happens, where one of the facehuggers attacks a character that resembles Ripley from Alien 3 quite a bit too.
Oh, I didn't even think about that, but maybe
But I was thinking about that because in the original Alien, it's given the indication that when a facehugger lays its eggs inside somebody, which to anybody that hasn't seen an Alien movie, this is all going to sound like a bunch of weird science fiction mumbo jumbo. Mm-hmm. But it took quite a while for it was John Hurt's character in the original, for the xenomorph to emerge from his body, and in this movie, it kind of seemed like it took 2 minutes after somebody was attacked by a facehugger.
Yeah.
So there is a conversation to be had about the evolution in which the development of a xenomorph is progressing, because this franchise is very much known for its commentary on evolution and how certain species of life progress over time. Mm-hmm. But when talking about continuity, it is definitely questionable for sure.
Yeah, we've started off pretty negative for a movie that we say we enjoyed.
We did, but it's because a lot of the positives, I think, and the negatives are very difficult to talk about without spoiling too much. But overall, going back to some of the things you said, the production value of this film is some of the best production value I've seen in a blockbuster this year. The production design is literally on par with something like Dune. Mm-hmm. The cinematography is up there for me as well. The sound mixing is up there. Mm-hmm.
The music
fantastic. Is terrific, and it doesn't really sound like music I've heard in any of the other Alien movies. It's all very well directed, and I just think Fede Álvarez's sense of direction is so solid from start to finish in general.
Yeah, the shots of outer space were fantastic.
Wild.
There's like an asteroid belt that's surrounding the planet, and the spaceship is flying around. Mm-hmm. That looks fantastic.
It looks really good,
especially when the ship is flying really close to the asteroid belt. Man, it's just, or like the asteroid ring or whatever.
And something that was so fun that you kind of notice almost instantly in the movie when it starts is that the production design is meant to be very reminiscent of the original Alien. Mm-hmm. And I thought that's also something when I mean continuity is really good in this film, because Romulus takes place between the events of the first Alien and before Aliens comes out.
Right. I think it takes place 20 years after Alien.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's like a 57-year time jump between the first Alien and Aliens.
But the Romulus is not the Nostromo.
No.
The issue with that is there's some stuff that reminds you around the Nostromo and Romulus.
Well, that's what's interesting.
The name of the spaceship is Romulus.
It's Romulus, like Remus.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the continuity, I see the beginning of the movie, and I see when the movie's just getting started and we're inside of a spaceship, and we see the tech, and it looks like the 1970s interpretation of what futuristic tech would look like. Mm-hmm. But this movie replicates that visual style and that production design of the original 1979 film so perfectly that it keeps that continuity intact. Mm-hmm. So when I see all of the tech, I'm just like, this movie really does want you to know that it, like, visually, it does take place in between those two movies. Mm-hmm. Because it's funny because, you know, it's a 1970s interpretation of what futuristic tech would look like, but this movie maintains that sense of continuity. Mm-hmm. And I think that was very impressive. And even the font on the opening credits was the same font used in the original Alien film.
Yeah.
And those are components of, like, fan service, I guess, that I like.
Sure.
And that works for this movie.
Yeah.
But those are more subtle, and, like, you got to be paying attention to catch those things. Mm-hmm. And then there are things that take no effort in terms of fan service to catch on to.
Right.
So yes, I really, really do love the technicalities of this movie. Thematically, it's not, I would say, as rich as the last two films in the franchise, that being Prometheus and Covenant, but it still carries over a lot of these themes of evolution, themes of biology, definitely, which have always been present in every film, but also nihilism is a huge component of these films, because it all amounts to nothing by the very end.
Well, there's that ongoing joke that no matter what Ripley does, the xenomorphs eventually come back, right? Mm-hmm. Like after the first Alien, you go to Aliens, and then it just keeps going on where it just doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. The xenomorphs will come back, more people will die, and even this big company will still try to exploit these. Yeah, they'll still try to make some type of whatever from these aliens that can't be killed, the perfect specimen, the perfect killing machine.
Corporate hypocrisy is a kind of ongoing theme in all of these movies too, because there's always like some sort of a feud going on between lead characters and just the large corporation they represent. Like in the first movie, the characters are just like contractors. They're just contractors for the Weyland-Yutani Corporation that are just sent off into space to like capture some artifacts for the company and then bring them back and do some investigating on this planet, and then they discover xenomorphs and shit and the space jockey. The second one, Aliens, definitely has probably the most commentary on corporate hypocrisy as well, and it's not really that surprising considering Aliens is a James Cameron film, and James Cameron very clearly hates corporate America and expresses that in a lot of his movies. And there's literally a character in that movie that represents the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, who just, starts to betray all the characters throughout the movie. And he's like the most dislikable character. And then Prometheus and Covenant also have that as well. And then this movie, you have this planet that is, built upon a labor force of a lot of young people for the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Like, it's a mining colony. And all they want to do is get off of this planet because they're all slowly fucking dying from all the toxicity of the planet that they're inhaling.
Yeah, even at the beginning of the movie, you see Rain and she's walking into this office because I guess maybe there's some plan where you work a certain amount of hours and then you're able to leave the planet. And the lady at the office, who isn't even she's probably one step above Rain, but just decides, oh no, you haven't earned enough time yet, and just increases the amount of time by like 24,000 hours, which is you're never getting off this planet. There's no choice. You have to get out of here.
Which just speaks to the fact that it's like you're always gonna have to work for a living. That's all there is to it. No matter what you do, even with the promise of paradise, it's always paradise lost.
Yeah.
So
ouch, that sucks.
But it's not, like I was saying, it's not as dense as I think the last two movies are. But there are themes that are hard to talk about without talking about spoilers that exist in this movie that make it unique to this film, I think. And so I don't know. You ready to transition into some spoilers for this movie?
I mean, I would just. This isn't even a spoilers. I guess we can. The first thing I would like to talk about is Andy.
I would too. So that's what I mean when it comes to themes too. So I recommend this movie. I still, especially if you're an Alien fan, I think there's a lot for a lot of people to like. For Alien fans, for horror fans, it's a very thrilling movie. It's a very intense film, and it's really good. It's not perfect, but there's a lot of phenomenal things to like about this movie, and I think on a technical side, it's one of the best blockbusters of the year for sure. So, transitioning into spoilers.
Yeah.
Hit me.
Fuck, man. Andy was the best part of this movie.
I would agree. The androids usually are in these movies. Yeah.
Michael Fassbender in the Prometheus movies was great.
He's so good in Prometheus, but then he kind of becomes the main character in Covenant, and he's playing two characters in that movie, which clearly that kind of carries over into this movie as well.
Oh, I didn't even think about that, but this movie borrows so much from the previous Alien
Like I said,
movies.
it's an amalgamation of everything we've seen in all the other Alien movies, and it's almost like Fede Álvarez just making a fan film in a lot of ways.
God, but I mean, that's kind of embarrassing for a guy who is in Hollywood, actually. Like, if this movie was made by an actual fan that didn't do anything before, I'd be like, God damn, you made a great movie.
He definitely kind of does what he did with Evil Dead when he created his Evil Dead remake, where there's enough originality in that movie and enough of a unique vision in that film to call it its own thing,
but it's definitely kind of carbon copy a lot of the same films that came before. And it's not exactly a remake, but it's kind of a requel.
Oh, I don't know. Anyway, back to Andy. Played by David Johnson. And
from Industry.
I love that show, man. I don't know. Are you watching it now?
I just finished season 1.
Okay.
It's good. It's really good. I'm really enjoying it.
Season 3 is great, too.
Yeah. There's only like 2 episodes out so far, right?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that I can catch up before this season ends.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm enjoying it right now. And he's great in this show.
He's great in Industry, and he's great in this movie.
Check out the movie Rye Lane. There was a rom-com that came out early last year. It's I don't like rom-coms very much. You won't hear us talking about them too much, but unless y'all want me to.
I think they do. I've
but
heard enough of
he's
from
really
our fans.
that's true. We get emails every day about do more rom-coms. And then name it Rom's rom-coms.
Oh, whoa. Segment?
Wouldn't that be sick?
Segment.
Is this the birth of something?
This is the Rom's rom-coms.
That sounds like a fucking franchise.
Oh boy. Okay.
Okay, get ready.
Let's do that.
February next year is gonna be a good month for everybody.
No, I in the movie, since we're past spoilers, in the movie, Andy at the beginning starts out is just this damaged android who is, an adopted brother from Rain for Rain. And before Rain's parents died, her father gave Andy this command: do what's best for Rain. But because he's damaged, he almost is playing like an autistic adult in a way.
I know,
right?
His performance is so magnificent. This
movie.
It's crazy.
And he plays after the first act of the movie. Right?
Yeah.
And then once there's a point where he gets updated, he gets repaired on the spacecraft, and that's important because they're being attacked by all these face huggers. And
then he becomes this articulate, sinister version of himself.
He becomes the fucking man. It's like, oh yeah, Andy knows what the fuck to do, man.
And it's because they put like the hard drive of Rook into his brain or whatever.
Rook that is just a different damaged android.
It's Ian Hull. It's Ash from the original.
It looks like Ash from the original, but it's a completely different android.
Yeah, and it's like, number one, that's weird. And it's like, when I'm thinking about continuity, again, that's kind of borrowed from something like Covenant and Prometheus, because Walter in Covenant is an updated version of David from Prometheus, because he's got like a completely different accent and different hair, and it's cool, and it really works well, and they juxtapose each other very well in that film, and it's very interesting. And in this movie, it's just a deep fake of Ian Holm, which is super creepy to look at throughout the entire film. And he's like split in half almost to the point where he looks like Bishop from Aliens at the very end of that movie.
Yeah.
And then he's just reciting lines constantly from the original Alien movie. And I'm like, not only was this just a bad idea from the jump, did they have any original things to do with this character?
And the CGI face didn't look all that great. It
looks horrible.
They should have done it more in shadow.
I know. I liked that moment where you see his face, but they kept showing him in the shadow so often, I immediately pieced it together before they showed it. And I was just like, oh no, that's going to be Ash, isn't it? And then the lights come on, and they make this big reveal about it, and it's like, whoa. And it's one of those fan servicey moments that I feel like, do adults want to see this? Because this is a movie for adults.
They don't want to see
because
that.
This is a movie, like, it's like the original Alien movie is like 50 fucking years old. And it's like anybody that loves that movie that is coming to see this movie doesn't give a shit about that.
No, and sometimes during this movie I was thinking about Deadpool, where there's a ton of fan service.
Deadpool, but the point of that movie was its fan service essentially, and it's just having fun with it, and that's a fun movie. It's not a freaking horror extravaganza that is Alien.
Well, and it's not a movie that's trying to be serious. Like an Alien movie is a serious,
it's very grounded
horror,
it is
sci-fi
serious,
movie.
And it just takes me out of the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm taking all this pretty seriously, and it's pretty thrilling and engaging and intense, and then they do that shit, and they have the classic pause for effect moment when they reveal it, and I'm just like, what the hell is this? And it's easy to rewrite that as a better movie. So
just choose a different actor.
Exactly. Or it's just a different version of Andy.
because that was
you mean Rook?
And because that was kind of the point and the theme of the movie in general. Because from what I was able to kind of pick up on, the movie's called Alien Romulus because Romulus is supposed to represent Andy and Remus is supposed to represent Rook in the movie.
Wow.
Because they are two sides. They're both these two icons that created an empire that is Rome, and one of them destroyed the other to gain all of the credibility for it.
Yeah.
And that was what my interpretation of why it's called Romulus. So it's technically kind of called Alien Andy.
Alien Andy. Yeah. I like that.
And so Andy
maybe is... Andy's kind of short for android.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I like that. That's good. But Andy's technically... It's lazy... Well... That's just lazy writing. No, but Andy is he's meant to be Romulus, and Remus is the antagonist that is Rook. And I'm just sitting there, and they do that to an extent when he gains kind of the
upgrade hard drive
that is taken from Rook, and he becomes more like Rook. He's very evil and cunning and trying to essentially get all of the characters killed and preserve the xenomorphs so for him to study and shit.
He's looking out for the interests of the company instead of the interests of Rain.
And it's a good story there. It's just easily improvable. Then just make the damaged android that's supposed to be a carbon copy of Ash from the first movie into just a damaged version of Andy. And he's just more submissive to the company.
Whoa!
It's just like that's just because the theme is already there. The theme of Romulus and Remus is there with that character and both characters, and it's like it's easily rewritable. But they just choose to go in this fan service direction for absolutely no reason that does nothing for the story, and that's why I'm enjoying the shit out of this movie. And it's a really good movie, but you can feel the fucking studio interference there. And it's just like, I don't feel like a creative like Fede Álvarez was like, let's make it Ash from the original. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's the kind of shit that is a studio mandate in a lot of these large budget films, where it's just like, we got to give people a reason to come to this movie because they hear that there's this crazy thing from the original. Everybody's going to be like, oh, I got to go and see that. It's like, no, trust your audience.
Well, you say that, but then you also just said that the Evil Dead remake was a requel, right?
Well, I think the same thing about this movie in a lot of ways, because even when you take that fan service out, it's still very similar to the original movies, but it's got a new and fresh execution to it.
So how much of this movie is Fede Álvarez and how much is it studio interference?
Any of the fan service in this movie feels like it's studio interference bullshit.
But there feels like a lot of fan service. Even we're going to talk about that final
we'll talk about
fuck you moment.
We'll talk about the final line, but there are like shots in this movie even where it is like they're taken from the original, like the scene where Rain kind of goes down the elevator and comes out with the gun. That's from Alien. Smoke, that's from Aliens. And it's like it's more subtle than something like Ash being in this movie for no reason. And it's like it's a homage kind of a shot, and it's only a visual, really.
Well, there's even the shot from Aliens when they're in like you see a lot of the xenomorphs crawling in
through the corridors. Yeah, through the corridors. It's got that dress up too in the corridors. Yeah. And it's got all of that like biology from xenomorphs, like kind of terraforming the environment a little bit for themselves. Yes. And that's straight from Aliens as well. And even that bird at the beginning. Yeah. That was the moment where I knew like there's gonna be something wrong with this movie.
You think so?
Because it's a really good shot when it's just a conversation between Rain and Andy at the moment, and the camera is just tilting towards the other side very slowly, and it's a good continuous shot. But then the center frame of the shot is that fucking bird that was on the table from Alien, and it's just the movie really wants you to know that that's there. And it's like, hey, look at this. Remember this? This is from the original movie. Pay more attention to this than the character development happening.
Going back to Blade Runner 2049, when Kay finds that wooden sculpture of the horse, it's not exactly the same because the object has a function in the story.
Very much so.
And there's it's been a while since I've seen Blade Runner, but it's just a reference to a horse from the original movie. There's no wooden horse in the first Blade Runner, right?
No.
Yeah. So then you find out that it's a sculpture that Decker carved for his kid, and so it just serves a different purpose. The bird is kind of just like, hey,
it's just fan service.
Remember
It's just
the original movie that I didn't do.
So yeah, the movie just does shit like that, and there's enough of it for it to be noticeable and warrant a discussion. Luckily, it doesn't ruin the movie for me.
No.
But it's just one of those things where it's like you can easily remove this or rewrite it, and it's a damn near perfect Alien movie.
Yeah, it's weird how this movie's still good and somehow still dropped the ball.
I know, right? Yeah. That's what like what I was saying in this discussion. It's like it's got more going for it than holding it back. But the things that hold it back are something that everybody's gonna feel the same thing about. I think
one of the coolest action set pieces to me. And
I know it though. I think I know what you're gonna say.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, because there's a few.
There's a lot of great set pieces, but there's one in particular in this movie that will sit with me forever.
Is it when they're walking in the corridor with all the face huggers crawling around?
No, but that scene is fucking
intense.
great. It is so intense, and you just see the animatronic work on the face huggers, and they look so real. They're so insect spider like in this movie, and it's like, man, this is creepy as shit. I do not like this.
This movie did help me realize what always bothered me about the Alien franchise. The face huggers fucking scare the shit out of me.
They're arguably scarier than the actual alien.
They're definitely xenomorphs are just big ass aliens. You've seen they're monsters
and they're hunters.
Yeah,
but like they're the result of a parasite essentially. Facehuggers are parasites.
They're invasive and they get on your face, which is already like
they wrap themselves around your neck so they can't break off. And I think there's a moment from what like Aliens or Alien 3 where they mentioned that like people die trying to have those things removed from their body essentially because they inject themselves deep into your esophagus. They wrap their tail around your neck so you can't remove them and you can't cut them off because they have acid blood. Yeah. So it's just going to burn you and anybody that tries to alive.
Yeah, it's this franchise has done a great job in designing these aliens for and just proving how there's so much evolution involved, right? Like the species has survived to become parasites and they survive by keep implanting these eggs in people. So the ones with acid blood are going to survive longer than the ones without acid blood, right? And the ones that are strong enough to crush the person's esophagus if they try to pull on the tail are going to survive longer, right?
It's always interesting to try and track the motivation of the xenomorphs too. And that's why this franchise is so concerned with evolution and life itself, because the only motivation you can really pin down for a xenomorph is to procreate and just make more of itself.
Yeah.
Beyond that, they just kind of kill people. They kill everything they see but themselves and the cat from the first movie.
There's the one scene in this movie where one of the characters, Kay, who's pregnant, and that plays
is it Isabel Morter?
Or Isabel Merced.
Yeah, Merced,
who was Dora the Explorer.
Dora the Explorer, she's the kid from the 5th Transformers movie.
Yeah, and now
she's in Sicario 2.
She really is,
she's
though.
She's the girl in Sicario 2.
She is, damn. No, she's grown up.
She's a good actor. She's got some good screams in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Her screams are, harrowing.
There's a part of the movie where she's running away from the xenomorph, and she's at this door where her friends are behind, and she's beating on the door like, let me in, and the xenomorph is just watching her at the door, waiting for her friends to open the door. And Andy comments and says, the monster's waiting for you to open the door so that it can get all three of us. I can't open this door. And it's such an intense moment of the movie. Man,
she dies 3 times in this movie.
This movie ends 3 times.
It ends 3 times. And it still has that classic Alien structure too, where even when they get off the ship, it just comes back onto the ship with them. My favorite set piece in the movie is the scene where she's shooting down all of these aliens, and then zero gravity turns on, and they have to navigate through the acid blood. Through zero gravity. And I'm like, this is one of the coolest and most creative science fiction ideas I have ever seen for this franchise.
It's so clever, and there's always that like breath of relief when the heroes in these movies actually kill the aliens.
I know, right?
Right? You just have
because they're not easy to kill.
They're not.
That's why they always like they make a huge point of that when Andy's talking, and he says it's like you can't shoot any of them because blood is acid and it'll drip through the hub of the ship and compromise its integrity, and we're
on the final floor of the spaceship, and
so if the blood drips down, then it's just gonna rip a hole into the ship and let out all the oxygen. We're all dead anyway,
and they're just flying through this acid blood that's just floating around in zero gravity. That was a great action set piece.
Incredible set piece.
So many.
I like the elevator shaft set piece too.
Yeah.
And then it culminates in the worst line delivery in this movie.
Let's talk about it.
Just like, get away from her, you bitch.
Bitch. Bitch. There's no reason why Andy would say bitch.
I hated it so much.
There's no reason, and it's borrowing from Aliens.
Exactly. It's one of the most iconic science fiction lines of all time, and that's why it's weird that he says it, because it's almost like he watched that movie. There's no reason that character would have to say it. Like, because he says it, and if he ended it with just saying, get away from her, then sure, whatever. But then he stutters just to say bitch. And then it's literally classic pause for effect moments. Like, oh, he said the thing.
It's so bad that I'm wondering why anyone. These are professionals. These are people who, even in editing, maybe I hope that they took a shot where it's like, okay, David, don't say anything. Let's just do a shot where you just shoot the alien and that's it.
Right. They
should have just kept that one. And it's not even stay away from her, you bitch. It's bitch. Because this is autistic Andy now.
He's back. He's back. And it's just like, hilarious, clever. Yeah. No, none of that worked.
Because in Aliens...
So that was the biggest eye roll that I got in this movie.
Well, even to pull the point even further, to bring it home, in Aliens, Ripley is holding Newt, and she's about to face the queen alien, and all the eggs are around, and so like it's basically these two motherly figures that have been leading to this showdown. And that's when she delivers this line, get away from her, you bitch. But in this movie, there's no reason why Andy
and it's a good payoff, too, because she's using that mechanism that she uses briefly at the beginning of the movie, too.
Yeah.
So she comes out and she's war ready.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, what a phenomenal payoff and an incredible epic line.
Yes.
And in this, it's just like, shameless fan service. And it's like, I don't care. So,
but I'm gonna start stuttering, bitch.
Yeah,
bitch. You remember that? Actually, reminded me of the scene where I hate that this reminded me of Do the Right Thing, when the light skinned guy that's like they're the Italian dude is cursing at the stuttering black guy. He's like, fuck you.
I remember that. I was thinking about the part from also 90s, The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
Stuttering Stanley. Yeah. Just like, stop it, you freak. It was annoying and it was comical, but like it didn't need to be there at all. And I'm like, okay, movie. But then, you think that that's the epic finale, and then, the movie has its classic third act continuation where they bring the alien back on the ship, and we see a complete abomination. One of the scariest things I've ever seen in my entire life, that is that final alien.
Yeah, basically Kay, who was pregnant for the whole movie, and we basically find out in the beginning of the second act that she's pregnant.
Yeah.
And she takes the black goo from the Covenant movies.
Yeah, they bring that back, and I like that. I'm glad that they mentioned it. I love that they mentioned that, because I think it's one of the most the bioweapons that the engineers created is one of the most fascinating things about Prometheus and Covenant to me. So I like that they made that connection in here.
Well, I thought it was gonna convert her into a xenomorph, but it actually converts her fetus into a xenomorph.
But it's like a xenomorph engineer hybrid.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's cool as shit.
And it's actually
scary as
played
shit,
by this like Romanian basketball player, because the alien's super tall.
It is tall. It is very tall.
And it sort of has like a weird spine.
Yeah, it's got like an exposed spine and some exposed bone marrow on like its neck and its face, but then it's got a xenomorph tail.
Yes.
But it's also
and the little mouth that comes out.
Yes. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That was so weird. But it's also like white and like smooth skin like the engineers have, and it's bald like the engineers. And it makes sense since the black goo is essentially taken from their own DNA.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was creepy as hell. And that one was CGI, like mostly it seemed like, with like motion capture CGI or something.
Probably.
But it looked great.
Yeah.
And it looked really good, because most of this movie employs a lot of animatronics and practical effects, which was really nice, and it all looks fantastic and very, very disturbing and authentic. But that was very motion capture CGI, but they don't show too much of it even when it's like attacking the characters. And it looks great. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
But it has that classic ending moment that, almost every alien movie has, with just blowing it out the airlock.
It just sort of went to a place where we've seen before, right? Like even Rain is in her underwear.
Literally,
and she's running away from the alien that's stowed away on this ship, and then she finds a space suit to get into.
Which is the same space suit that Ripley puts herself into from the original Alien.
I mean, what are you gonna do?
I know, right? At that point, that was my attitude at that point.
What do you want from me?
Just like, I don't know.
Well, because then by that time,
what are we talking about?
And honestly, it's that part isn't even the worst fan service.
No, it's not,
like,
because it's just there. It's just happening. But even before all that happens, you have like Rook talking to them through like a camera or whatever, and he just says, "But you have my sympathies," like he says in the original movie, and I'm like, what the fuck? Why is he reciting lines for like what is going on with the fan service? Who had these ideas?
I like your idea of like Remus Andy.
Yeah,
maybe if he recited that line, I would have been okay with that.
But like if you have like Rook, who looks like Andy. Who's supposed to be a representation of Remus, and he recites that line.
Yes.
It's better.
Yeah.
But then you still have Andy reciting the Ripley lines, but you get away with him being an android reciting lines from another android because you just can assume it's coded into him or something.
Yeah, but even then, we've seen that androids that are even similar to each other are much different, because they're still AI, so it is like a different human being.
Yeah, like look at Bishop too.
Bishop has a lot of different
Bishop's like
implementations in the Alien universe.
Bishop and Andy are probably the only androids in this series that we've seen that are like good, which I guess accounts for only about half of them at this point. But it's nice to see that contrast. It's just this movie doesn't contrast that point that it's trying to make with the juxtaposition of Remus and Romulus with Andy and Rook nearly as clever as it could have.
For a movie that we enjoy, we're criticizing it.
Because it's a dense movie. There's a lot to talk about with this movie. There's a lot of themes, even though they're kind of hard to pinpoint. But I settle on that theme of it just kind of being about it just being a movie really about Andy at its core, and again about life and the way we interpret life. Because everybody hates Andy because he's an android in the movie, and Rain is the only one that's kind of vouching for him throughout the entire story.
Right.
And this movie also really loves to take perspective of its androids, like a lot of these movies have to, and make an emphasis on them because, again, it's about life and evolution in a lot of ways. So creation, evolution, nihilism, it's all there and it all makes sense. And, you could say that this movie's messy at making a lot of those points because on the surface it's very easy to follow and it's not really that dense, but it's also still a science fiction movie with a lot of world building and history attached to it. And it's still very, very good. I would say.
Yeah.
I almost loved this movie, despite all of my criticisms for it. I would totally love to see this movie again. It's really hard to be a fan of this franchise and not talk about those things worth criticizing in this movie, because it's not easily ignorable. It's not just a criticism, part of the component of this movie where I watch and I'm like, it's nitpicking. It's really not. It's constructive criticism.
This movie goes from good to great if you change the Rook actor throughout the bitch line. Those two alone,
those are the main things.
If you just, it's a great movie.
Yeah.
And I know that for a lot of people, they steal too much from the previous movies.
They do, but you also kind of, at this point, you should expect a formula, and for your characters to not always make the most rational decisions.
No.
And that's okay. Also just, the formula of a classic slasher movie, too. Like, if your characters aren't kind of stupid, then you don't have much of a good slasher. Because we're here to see people get slashed.
This movie ends if Bjorn doesn't save the Asian girl.
True.
Right? Like, if they just get back on the ship and they leave the Asian chick with the face hugger on the spaceship, this movie ends.
This movie's over.
Yeah.
So, but what do? It's still a really good Alien movie. It's not the best, but it's far from the worst.
It's definitely not the worst.
No, it's so far from the
Alien
worst.
versus Predator movies exist.
Those are down there. It's definitely still above Resurrection. And it's probably above Prometheus and Alien 3 for me as well. Just because I do. It is just nice that after we've had 2 Ridley Scott films, that like Ridley Scott's directed what feels like a majority of this franchise at this point. It's nice to have a new vision on an Alien film too, even again if it is just taking a lot of pieces from previous films and amalgamating it together into one film.
And there probably will be a sequel because they still have some of the Black Covenant goo on the spaceship, and
everybody's favorite. I mean, I was half expecting David to like appear by the end of this movie.
Wow.
I do kind of wish that happened because I want to see like how the Covenant story continues, because it has such a bleak ending. Like, which isn't saying much because of most of these films have a bleak ending.
Yeah.
But that was like the only movie in this franchise where literally every single character dies.
Yeah, I don't know if this movie should have a sequel just because it might ruin the continuity to Aliens.
We're getting a series next year called Alien Earth, and it's being created by the guy that did the Fargo TV series. So I'm very excited about that because that guy, Noah Hawley, I love the Fargo show. Every season is pretty fucking spectacular, I think. And to see it, like, he has a lot of philosophy that I think will lend itself very well to the Alien franchise. And for a miniseries, I think it could be very interesting. Apparently, it's going to be taking place even before Prometheus. So
yeah, see, I'm not an Alien fan, so I'm not opposed or for more Alien stuff, but it might be a good time to end just because I think that the studio, as long as these movies make money, the studios are never going to end.
True, and this did very well. I mean,
$40 million.
The reception for it was really good, and it made
better than
money.
Borderlands.
Yeah, well, everything will this year.
Yeah,
but I mean, I recommend Alien Romanus or Alien Romulus.
Alien Romanus is going to be the next movie.
Aliens, rom-coms.
Ah, yes. The sequel we all need.
Yep, we do. We really do. But I recommend this movie. I think it's a great Alien movie. I think it's a great horror thriller. Go check it out. I liked it quite a bit. Probably one of my favorite blockbusters of the year.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Go see it.
Yeah.
Especially if you've seen everything else out already.
Yeah.
Go see this movie.
Go
Why
check
not?
it out.
Yeah.
It's good. It's a good time at the movies. It's scary, thrilling, great production value, good direction, good acting. It's a good time. But to end this, we would like to give a special thank you to everybody out there. We just hit 500 downloads.
That's such a great accomplishment because we've only been doing this podcast for 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. It feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good. And we want to reassure everybody, we don't think we're going anywhere.
We got plenty of more stuff coming down. We want to keep taking in recommendations from everybody. We're hoping to start up with some more video essay type content within the next few months. We got, like we've been talking about, we got a big couple next months of fall for Halloween and things like that. So send us in your recommendations. Don't forget to write into our email. All that information is in the description. Just put leaf pile in the subject with any of your questions, comments, and we would be happy to answer those on the podcast. And as always, thank you to everybody. Thank you for getting us to 500 downloads. We're going to keep going. We're hoping to make it to 1,000 by the end of the year. And yeah, with everything, this is the Loose Leaf Media Podcast. Did this with my co-host,
Romanus.
And we'll see you guys on the next one.
Bye.
Take care.